Welcome to UnMic'd, a video series that blurs the edges that connect the world of opera to just about everything else. My name is Joe Specter, and I'm the President and General Director of Arizona Opera. As a kid who grew up in Miami, Florida, with dreams of being a hard rock star when I was an adult, and who later ended up picking martial arts up and training in that for a big portion of my life, I have found those previous dreams and passions feeding into my everyday leadership of this opera company against all odds. The idea of UnMic'd, came from this notion that really disparate lifestyles, passions, hobbies, experiences in a world that's totally unrelated that connects to the world of opera, so that we can bring together people from these different lifestyles through this really wonderful art form. During each episode, I will be joined by a recognized professional from the opera field and a professional from another field who engages in similar work to demonstrate just how the elements of opera are the elements of our everyday lives. Hi, I'm Joe Specter, and welcome to episode 4 of Arizona Opera's UnMic'd, the show where we find the blurry edge between the worlds of opera and just about everything else. I'm really excited about this episode, which I am calling Jamming with the Doc Stars today, to shine a light on a really special area that is so important to opera and how that ties to the world of high performance outside of opera. We have two really wonderful guests here today. Dr. Gwen Korovin, MD, who is a ENT board certified from the American Academy of Otolaryngology based in Manhattan, and Dr. Michael Lee, MD, who is board certified in orthopedic surgery based here in beautiful Phoenix, Arizona. It's so wonderful to have you both here with us today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Joe. Glad to be here.
Thank you for inviting us.
It is our pleasure. I'm going to do something that I rarely do. I want to read each of your bios because you guys have some serious street cred, and I would really just love for the viewers of this show to know who it is they're visiting with today and your backgrounds and the level of expertise that you're bringing to this conversation. So I'll start with Gwen. Dr. Korovin provides personalized care for the full range of ear, nose, and throat, and her expertise include the diagnosis and treatment of a wide range of throat and voice disorders, ear, nasal, and sinus problems, as well as head and neck ailments. And I can tell you, as a former singer, I have had all of those at one point or another. Dr. Korovin is a renowned voice expert who treats the world's most famous singers, actors, and public figures, which include Celine Dion, Audra McDonald, Lady Gaga, John Mayer, and more. Dr. Korovin is also the clinical assistant professor of otolaryngology at New York University School of Medicine, frequently appears on TV as an expert on vocal health, and has authored a major voice textbook, now in its 4th edition. That's just amazing work, Gwen. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Dr. Mike Lee, MD, is a board-certified doctor in orthopedic surgery and received his medical degree from the University of Arizona in Tucson, Arizona Opera's birth city. Dr. Lee is the retired head physician and orthopedic surgeon for the Major League Baseball team, the Arizona Diamondbacks, and the NFL team, Arizona Cardinals, and served as the orthopedist for the USA World Baseball team. Dr. Lee also maintains a private practice that specializes in sports injuries, concentrating on injuries to the knee, shoulder, and elbow. He is a member of the American Orthopedic Society of Sports Medicine, the Association of Major League Baseball Team Physicians, the NFL Team Physician Society, and more. It's just great to have you both with us today. As I said before, I think I probably tore a rotator cuff holding your bios. They're so heavy. The work that you've done is so tremendous. Gwen, I think it's worth just honoring the way in which we came to get to connect with you today. Michael Maniaci, who's on our development team here at the Opera, an accomplished countertenor with, I think, about 20 years on the stage, said if you're going to do an episode with an ENT, you have to talk to Dr. Gwen. So thank you for taking good care of Michael, and hopefully he's in good hands with us here. And Mike and Martha Lee are wonderful opera family members here at Arizona Opera. who I've just been honored to spend time with, at the opera, in the lobby, at the plaza outside, having a glass of wine. But your career has always been a fascination to me. I love football. I love a variety of sports. We talked a minute ago about MMA, and I think the work that the two of you do really is very closely related. You're both working with people at the top of their fields in this incredibly specialized area of medicine. So to dive in with the questions here, and Gwen, let's start with you. Um, you work with patients who are at that highest level of international accomplishment. How did you find your way here? How did you get to this job? This is a very unique profession.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting question. I started out, obviously, as we all do, just doing general ear, nose, and throat. And what happened was that while I was an intern at Lenox Hill Hospital and then a resident at New York Eye and Ear, I got to know someone, Dr. Wilbur James Gould, who I always call was one of the founding fathers of voice. He started the Voice Foundation. He was one of the people that put together singing teachers, speech pathologists, scientists, doctors, and really forged the way for everybody to be in collaboration. And he had been doing this kind of work for many, many years. And I was fortunate enough to meet him and to get to know him. And then he actually offered me a position to come in and help him. In medical school, actually, I became really interested in voice. It's strange. We only had a 2-week elective in ear, nose, and throat. And one of the days that they showed videos, there was a woman in a room showing videos of vocal folds, and it was so fascinating to me. It's one of the highlights. I remember it more than anything else of medical school. And lo and behold, years later, I started to work with Dr. Gould, and I remembered that day so clearly. And it's amazing that I ended up doing that work and getting to know the person who showed those videos so well years later. So
But there was just something that captivated your imagination.
exactly, where you see it vocal folds are fascinating to look at. We do a lot of videos, flexible scopes and rigid scopes, and it's just incredible if you see it, what amazing sounds. And because you worked and sang, and Michael, what it is to hear great voices. And it's amazing that they come from this little set of vocal folds and everything else surrounding them. So
Amazing,
yeah,
amazing. And what about you, Mike? How did you get to your place? Was it the same sort of thing where you were inspired by an X-ray of someone's someone's shoulder or back, or where along the line of your medical study did you say, this is the area for me? This is what I'm most interested in.
Yeah, I think it was similar. I remember starting medical school, being very excited and keeping an open mind about, what field should I go into? Where would I find myself best matched? And an athlete growing up, playing sports, and really enjoying the immediate gratification of taking care of something and fixing it, and then it being done again, sort of drew me into the surgical realm initially. And then from there, going through the various rotations, as Gwen had said, I was just really drawn to orthopedics. I had a master's degree in exercise physiology, an undergraduate degree in biochemistry and physiology. So I was always drawn to the physical, mechanical parts of the body. And naturally, I thought that orthopedic surgery could kind of fit that interest of mine.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I took that course, and then decided once inside of orthopedic surgery to do a fellowship within sports medicine. And so that's what allowed me to kind of pursue those. It's been a wonderful run, and I'm still enjoying it greatly. And I feel fortunate to have that opportunity.
Great. It seems like both of you have really cool jobs. I mean, as doctors go, there are specialties that don't have the cachet of what you guys get to do. You get to work with just these fascinating fascinating individuals, and we'll get into what that dynamic is like on sort of a human level in just a minute. But before we go there, and sticking with you, Mike, for just a sec, you described how you came to sports from your medical training, and how you sort of followed that tributary down into to where you are now. But was there anything in your past, whether as a kid or anything like that, that sort of did you ever play sports, something like that that helps you form an emotional connection to your work? And I ask this question because in the opera business, we're very much an inmates run the asylum sort of practice. I was a former opera singer, and now I'm the general director. Michael Maniaci, who we talked about a little while ago, our major gifts officer, same thing. And I just wonder if you connect to sports directly from your own bio going back.
Oh, for sure. I think there was a big connection. I mean, growing up, I was a young boy that loved to be outside. I mean, Arizona sort of makes itself available for that, year round, which is, unique in one sense. So I played all the sports growing up, and then eventually, and I enjoyed every one of them. And eventually, when I got into high school, I was playing all three sports, and as well, I was a swimmer. And it turned out that swimming turned out to be probably I was probably the best at, so to speak. And then I went on to swim in college and beyond, the masters, and, triathlons and things along those nations. So I was always into sports and working out. So certainly that was a big draw to me, that if, and I had some minor injuries, but, I never blew out my knee or blew out my shoulder. Mm-hmm. But, as I saw patients that did that, I had a personal relationship of, I've been there, I know what they're sort of going through a little bit. And I really enjoy that camaraderie, so to speak, with the, their desire to get back to competition and able to keep them fit and working out. And so I think that was, the natural draw for me, for sure.
Got it. Yeah, I didn't put this on any of the preparation material, but you're talking about swimming. What's the most common swimming related injury?
It's mainly an upper extremity sport. So by far, shoulder is the most common injury in a swimmer. Uh-huh. You rarely get lower body injuries, but the shoulder, you're just churning through that water with resistance, for 4 hours a day. And, so you get a little overuse there, and that's the most common by far.
Right. Gosh, you must see so many shoulders. I can only imagine.
I'd see a lot of shoulders, yeah.
Yeah, but over to you, Gwen. So did you ever have any background in singing? Were you ever in chorus growing up? Were you interested in singers? Where's that connection?
Yes, I was. I was thinking about that. It actually goes back to, I grew up going to summer camp and would always be in, the summer production or whatever it was. I remember being in Fiddler on the Roof, for instance, and being in the chorus. I was never, unfortunately, the solo person. Also, high school, I grew up in New York City, actually in Brooklyn, and we had something called Sing, high school Sing, where the different grades would prepare a whole show. You'd rewrite the lyrics to songs, and you would actually design a story around it. And I both wrote lyrics, and I also was in the chorus again for that. Then once I started later on, we're also growing up in New York and having access to Broadway, and being able to go to Broadway shows was incredible. And my parents used to get the soundtracks for all the various Broadway shows, so I would listen to it coming home. I do have to admit, and I should tell Mike, that I wanted to listen to this, and my father would come in, turn it off, and turn on sports. But anyway, he had been a professional athlete in his day, and they weren't as interested in music. So I grew up with both music and sports. And then once I started more in the field and getting interested, I did take some voice lessons in order to know what the process was like, really.
Right.
I got through a lot of master classes, but I'm not someone, I think I'd rather hear my patients performing than hear me singing.
Right.
So, gosh, it must be exhilarating, for someone that celebrated artists, singing artists as a kid, then to be able to help them when they have challenges. I mean, that just seems like a big rush. But before we go to this next topic, that's an extension of that, I have to ask you just straight New York question: where in Brooklyn?
Oh, so an area called Flatlands.
Flatlands.
Uh,
Okay.
No, Brooklyn. It's
I
basically,
lived in Bay Ridge for a summer,
oh,
but I lived
okay,
all over New York for a decade.
kind
So
of the other end of Brooklyn, like way
yeah,
out in the south.
gotcha,
So,
gotcha, gotcha.
but we still managed to come to New York and see shows and go to some games at the Garden. So.
Indeed, it's all New York. It's all New York. So both of you have this uh, reverence or appreciation for the fields that you serve, the athletes that you serve, or the vocal athletes. And I'm just fascinated with the general idea of high performance. And of course, that applies to both of you as well. Your patients are counting on you each and every day to really bring your A game. And so, staying with you for a moment, Gwen, um, this is like one of those I don't know if it's a time management question or what, but it's what do you do to ensure that you're able to perform at your highest level for people that are counting on you? It's such a
That is a
profound
good
extent.
question, Joe. It's, I think staying in the best, both physical and emotional health. In other words, being, I I work out a lot, do a lot of aerobics. I try to keep myself going and just doing things all the time. Obviously, getting enough rest, but on the other hand, also accepting and loving the fact that I am available to my patients 24/7. So when they need it, and you don't get calls like medicine, and especially when you're taking care of these type of patients that we both take care of, is not a 9 to 5 Monday to Friday job. They just don't always have the problems. They get out of a show at 11 o'clock at night and you're getting the call, can you talk to this person, can you see them? So it's a matter of just staying very clear and level-headed in the availability all the time.
Mhm. This is sort of a pre-COVID question, but um, I know that a lot of singers, when they're under some sort of duress, they might call on their voice teacher to, to certainly to talk to them, but even to travel for them to, you know, to do a checkup and get everything back in line. Do you get those calls? Do you ever have to hop on a plane or a bus or a train or a bicycle
Yes.
to get to a
It
patient?
has happened. I've gone multiple times. I mean, more of it is probably, local, going to the Broadway theaters or going to see somebody in their hotel suite or their apartment. But I have definitely hopped on some planes to go
Yeah.
see people. And you really have to just be ready and be able to adjust your schedule, because
Mhm.
that's what it takes to really care for these type of, high level performers.
Yeah, and such a type of trust they invest in you, uh, to take care of this, as you said, these tiny little box.
Yes.
Is
Yeah.
their whole career. What about you, Mike? What are the routines, the structures that you put in your life, in your day, to keep your mind sharp, your body sharp, to do that? It's physical work in addition to being mental work. What is it? What is the magical combination for Mike Lee?
Yeah, I totally agree with Gwen's approach. I mean, that balance, right, of life. We both work, crazy hours, and availability is a plus, and you gotta be there for them. At the same point in time, you got to take time for yourself. So I get up early, work out for a good hour or so prior to getting to work, and I make that a priority. And so that kind of helps my mental status, not just my physical. It helps me. I think it gives me energy. I think it gives me clarity of thought. When I'm exercising and working out, I get time to sort of mull over my day, and or mull over a recent patient, or concern I have of an injury, and what's the best way that we're going to address this. So that certainly is a big part of it. And then as Gwen said, eating healthy as best we can, and trying to get at least 6 hours sleep for me. Love to get 7. Those are really good things that help me stay on my game.
I bet. I don't know about you, and I suspect this is true for both of you. This is such personal work that all of us do, that all three of us do. And these are very human fields where interacting with other folks is really just the heartbeat of what we are. Um, is it hard to shut it off at night? Starting with Mike. I mean, if you've got a patient who's in a tough spot and you're trying to get them around that corner, are you able to find a space for you to protect and make sure that you're able to sort of cordon that off, or is it just all encompassing and you Mike Lee MD all the time?
No, I think at one point in time when I was younger, it would be more all encompassing for me. And it certainly can be depending on the situation. But I've learned to do, I've got to get my own time. I'm going to be better for them if I'm sort of on this for me. And so I have no problem hitting my pillow and going right to sleep. That's been an advantage for me. But certainly if I have a difficult situation that I'm mulling over, I may wake up in the middle of the night and suddenly, wow, hey, this is the approach we need to take, or,
Wow.
So forth. So I'm sure I'm dreaming about it, but it's so important for me to get my time. I really think that helps me treat them, even better. So
I think that's probably right. What about you, Gwen? Is it the middle of the night you dream of, removing someone's nodes, or?
It's either, like Mike said, the middle of working out when all, you're just doing, and, whether it's running or swimming, which I like to do, and you'll just get this brainstorm suddenly, or the middle of the night when I think of something and realize that that's the way something should be approached. I know you asked about you talked about some of the voice teachers, going and jumping on a plane, and one of the things also is my life. A lot of the people that I know and socialize with are some of the voice trainers and voice teachers and all, so it all gets mixed up together.
Oh,
and a lot of times, even when I'm in a social situation, we're ending up discussing medical performance related things. So it is sometimes very hard to separate the two.
That sort of was a natural segue to the next place I want to go, which is, what are the common issues that you see most often, Gwen, with high performers in the fields that you work with, and in particular, reflecting on that question, what if you were advising up and comer singers in Broadway, opera, what have you? What do you wish they knew about their craft to protect themselves so that they can grow in a healthy way? If you had to just pick one thing.
Well, I think the medical issues, some of them are very similar to what other people will get. People will get sick, or they will overuse their voice. It's just that the performers don't often have the time or the freedom to be able to just rest and get rid of something. I mean, they feel the pressure to perform all the time, which is something that, and the travel schedules can be crazy, and the not only travel schedules, the travel conditions, being in different hotels, the environment not being great, not always being able to eat like they should, all of those things. So the medical issues end up getting magnified in the high level performers.
Mm-hmm.
And well, sometimes early on in the careers, they feel like they have to say yes to everything, and they're doing night after night after night of shows. And then once their careers are at a certain level, they're able to actually sometimes adjust at least their performance schedule. But then there's a lot of demand for interviews and meet and greets and all of those type of things, which become a big problem. I would say for young performers, the one other thing with the medical issues too is that I would say is most important is really early on establishing a relationship with a physician that takes care of performers, that will know them and know them well, so that if they're on the road and something is going on, they can always, I have a lot of people who travel all over, and I get these calls. They've seen a doctor that said, oh my gosh, there's something wrong. And this person's
right.
baseline condition. So I think really establishing someone that you can call on to ask any questions you need and know you so well, I think is so important for the younger singers to have that, and to know what also things look like when they're at their baseline. So doing, I mentioned those scopes like the fiber optic or the rigid scope, and just knowing what their vocal folds look like and how the rest of their system works. And so that going down the road, if anything is going on, they at least have the baseline there.
Right. That's such great advice. And someone had told me early when I was a singer, find the 2 or 3 people that you really trust and make sure you're always listening to those folks as you go through. And I hadn't necessarily thought of the ENT as part of that team, but it makes it makes complete and utter sense that that would be the case. Is there a malady that you see most frequently with singers? Reflux, vocal hemorrhages. I mean, it would just be. I'm just curious about that. There's certainly ones that seem common to me. Mike mentioned shoulder injuries with swimmers. Is there something that you see more than you see anything else?
Actually, I think you hit the nail on the head, which is reflux is probably laryngopharyngeal reflux or gastroesophageal reflux, where you're getting stomach acids coming up and irritating the throat and the voice box, is probably one of the most common things. And people say, well, why is it so common in singers? It's common in everybody, but why is it's more of a problem in singers? Because their throats are more sensitive. They're also the way they're using their muscles and their diaphragm and their schedules. If you're performing at 8 o'clock at night, you're not living a normal life where you may be eating at different times, not eating the right things, the stress of everything. And then reflux then is responsible for making the throat more vulnerable to other problems. So yes, I would say reflux is the biggest underlying issue. And then you get the other things on top of it.
Yeah, that was a shock to me, and I really didn't know much about reflux until I started experiencing myself when I was at the Academy of Vocal Arts, and it just sort of came out of nowhere. I'd never had issues with it before, and then I found that after lunch every day I was losing my voice, and I didn't know why. And it turned out, when I have General Tso's chicken, and I get it on spicy, and then I go try to sing Lucia di Lammermoor, I'm not going to have a voice an hour later.
Right.
So no one sings Lucia di Lammermoor probably in your office, Mike. But what are the most common issues that you see with your patients? And then the second piece, and I do think these are related questions, because so many injuries I think are chronic injuries and bad habits sustained over a period of time. What are the most common ones you see, and that you would warn young athletes against? Be careful with your knees and or whatever.
Sure. I think the most common thing I would, in my field, it's overuse to various parts of the body, depending on the sport, of course. If you're a thrower, that's going to be your shoulder and your elbow. If you're a swimmer, your shoulders. If you're a track athlete, a basketball player, your knees, and particularly a soccer player, your knees. And so, you're using these areas of your body, and you're just repetitively doing this all the time. Not only are you playing in high level games, but you're practicing almost daily. And the interesting thing I think that's developed over the years in youth sports has been the specialization of playing one single sport, so that if you're good at it, then you're going to stay at it. You want to get behind the other kids that are staying with it. And that leads to these young people playing for 3 and 4 teams at the same time, and they never get a break. Wow. And then what happens is they get these overuse injuries. And in a younger person, it might be what we call a growth plate injury, where their bones will actually sort of separate at the areas of weakness where they normally grow very quickly. And so what you end up doing as a physician, as a surgeon, is letting them know, hey, it's okay to take time off, and you need to take time off. And I always reflect to them, listen, professional athletes don't play baseball 12 months a year like you are. They play it for 6, 9 months, depending on how far their team will go. But they take a full 3 months to rest, rehabilitate, and to reset. And I said, it's really important for you to do that. And I encourage it for them to play, if they want to stay in different games, to play different sports. So you're not constantly doing the same thing, throwing the football, every day, but you're, shooting a basketball. Now you're still using your arm, but in a totally different way, your muscles in a different way, and a different load on your joints. So you don't get that overuse syndrome that we see so often. So for me, it's a matter of balance. Take some time off. Make sure you take time to maintain your muscle balance and, the opposite side of your body. If you're in a single-sided sport, like a thrower or a batter, they're always on one side, and you need to make sure you stay developed on the other side as well. So there's a lot of things, but I would think, Joe, that overuse syndrome is by far the most common thing.
And yet at the same time, the pressure on young athletes or young singers to always be there for every play or sing full out on every aria is incredibly intense. And yet at the same time, if you don't protect yourself, no one else is going to, right?
Right.
That sort of goes to Gwen's point about making sure you have that person you can call up, an ENT or orthopedist on your team is going to be able to say it's okay to sit this one out and restore your body. This next question is one that Michael helped me think of, and it's really interesting. I'm going to start with Gwen, which is, among the different types of vocal artists that you work with, whether they're opera singers or musical theater belters, broadcast journalists, whatever the case may be, do you see a range of different kinds of medical issues among that spectrum? You mentioned that reflux was a common malady. Is that particular to a certain area? Or do they tend to be more broad spectrum when people come to your office? It's going to be one of these three things most of the time.
It tends to be broad spectrum. I think getting back to what Mike said, overuse is probably the other biggest problem that we see. Now, opera singers, at least, unless they're rehearsing, constantly, once they get to a certain level, they're only doing that role, say, every third night or every fourth night. So we don't always see as much overuse in opera singers. They have the other problems. The Broadway belters, who are doing 8 shows a week, plus they're rehearsing during the day, or they're doing something else, or they're getting called in for put-in rehearsals, they even tend to overuse their voice more than some of the other people. The broadcast journalists, they may be dealing with more technical things and equipment. So you see different problems in the different groups, some similarities, some differences in them.
Gotcha. Well, that probably keeps the work interesting, though, just to have that variety.
Absolutely.
What about you, Mike? You already sort of touched on this, different injuries for different sports. Maybe thinking more about the idea of rehabilitation for those injuries. Talk just a little bit about that, since we've touched a little bit on the particular injuries you're most common to see. What about the recovery process across that spectrum?
Yeah, part of the recovery is, preventing injury, not only healing injury, but preventing injury, right? Or doing a pre-rehab. And so making sure that if this young man is out throwing, 6 days a week, that he maintains a specific workout that we have written for him very thoroughly to maintain his muscle balance, because you'll tend to overuse it. One muscle will get extremely tight and strained, and then you start to break down the rest of the body. The shoulder gets injured and you're not with the same mechanical angles that you were, and then suddenly that throws out the elbow. And so it's a matter of not just treating, let's say, the swollen knee, but you want to make sure that hip is good. You want to make sure that hip has normal muscle balance, and flexibility is critical. And, you know, when I look at a thrower that's got a shoulder injury, I'm looking at their great toe that they're pushing off on, as well as the rotation of their hip that they're landing on. And I'm making sure that they don't have some problem with their elbow. So you look at the whole, what we call the kinetic chain. So the whole process of the body. And so rehabilitation, Joe, is critical, and not just that specific body part, but really evaluating the whole body as the to be conditioned and trained appropriately.
You're making me feel really guilty about never doing the stretching part of the workout when I have the video, and I like to just fast forward as fast as possible. Right. The kinetic chain, I love that. And you may not use that exact terminology, Gwen, but there's that same systematic concept. When I had my reflux issues, you know, I was finding that I was pushing, I was getting hoarse, and you could probably scope me and see there was issues there. But if you're not looking further down and figuring out what's going with the GI stuff, you don't solve the whole problem. So I guess you must do the same thing, look at the whole system, right?
Absolutely. Look at the whole body, because it's even, you know, we're talking about the vocal folds, which are basically two muscles that are 1 inch long, and so many parts of the body will affect it. Anything in the upper respiratory, lower respiratory system, gastric system with the reflux, even posture, similar type of thing. We're also looking at somebody, you know, when they're standing and they're performing, are they leaning towards one way or the other? You get the singers who are also play instruments, and they may be leaning one way or the other. So there's that similarity to what happens to the athletes as well. And we really have to look at the whole body and make sure that the patient has really the right team of people to working with them, besides just the doctor and the voice teacher. There's a lot of things that go into it, and a lot of body work that has to be taken care of.
Yeah, you're doing an equally good job of making me feel guilt about my Alexander technique dropout and Feldenkrais. It's like, you know, that stuff is so important. I'm not denigrating at all, but it takes a kind of patience, you know, because so often we get that big juicy aria, you know, and we just want to dig straight into it and start squealing away on the high notes. But you have to take care of that whole system, and everything needs to be playing nicely together so you can do it at the top level. So this is one of the most sensitive. This is one of the most sensitive questions. I know you can't talk about specific patients, of course, but you know, you're dealing with these tiny little muscles, this joint here, this knee there, the kinetic chain, you know, all these ideas relating to the physiology of a human being. And there are just times that whatever that problem is, it might not be solvable, or at least not solvable to the extent that that person is able to continue on at the level that they had previous to an injury. How do you prepare yourself for that kind of conversation? You've run the whole course. I mean, you've both talked in a way that's obviously very emotional about your work. It's clear that you care passionately about what you do. How do you prepare yourself for that moment where there's just not a path forward to be a high level performer anymore? Mike, I'll start with you first. I'm sure you both had to have this kind of talk.
Yeah, and there are ones you definitely don't look forward to. And, you know, it's hard. I mean, a lot of the time I would say, Joe, that the player or athlete will have some realization that this injury is different than others. And I've had a really hard time getting myself back to where I really need to be at that same level again. You know, that shoulder surgery helped me. I don't have pain anymore. I can move it better than I did, but maybe my velocity of my ball dropped 5 miles an hour. And now those hitters in New York are just knocking it out of the park every time we see them. And so, you know, some of that, I think oftentimes they'll come into with some realization. And basically what I do is whenever you go in and as a surgeon, and you're going in to fix them, you're telling them, you know what, we are absolutely going to do the best job that we are capable of doing, and we will not, take any shortcuts. And when I'm working on you, there is nobody else in my realm, in my world. And I will do everything I can, and we're going to get the best physical therapist, the best stretch therapist, myofascial therapist to work with you after. But I tell them right off the top, I don't know if you're going to be back at high level. I think you've got a really good chance, but the problem is when it doesn't happen, and then you're stuck. And you're telling them, hopefully they've had a long career, and you said, you got to take this one home. That you can now take what you have and apply this to some of the other folks that are struggling, or some of the young people that you can now mentor and educate. And so hopefully you're taking them in a bit of a different direction. But it's hard. I mean, they have to come to grips with it. And for some people, that's more difficult than others.
Yeah. And I bet it's proportionally higher for younger athletes who are just at the front end. Something bad happens, they get tackled a certain way, and they don't have that legacy. They had a legacy to look forward to. I can only imagine.
Right. And they had that dream, that dream has been now totally crushed. And then you realize, or you tell them, there is more to life than just this, and you got a lot to offer. You might have been really talented at that, but that's the only thing you've maybe pursued. Let's go with something else. So you try to encourage them, but yeah, it's crushing. And you sit there with them, and you put their arm around their shoulders, and you cry occasionally with them, but that's what happens.
How do you recover from that? I mean, it probably is like your own mourning process because of your level of emotional investment. You just need to work through it, you grieve through it, and move on.
Yeah, it's exactly. And you have to realize that that's life, and it happens, and it happens to in all realms of life, and in all different occupations and all different pursuits. I think it's just, if they know that you were there for them, and they know that you're there for them in the future, whatever you can do to help them, it sort of makes that transition a little easier. Doesn't make it easy though at all. It's very difficult.
What about you, Gwen? I think there are some singers who famously have had vocal issues and have either come back or haven't. And I would guess that there are probably a large multiple above that of people who, never talk about a vocal issue that they have. There's this, among singers, I think there can be this level of shame, talking about the idea, for instance, that you had, nodes or something like that, and a worry that will redound to your reputation in the career. And there, as many as advances in the medicine that there have been, you must have to have that conversation sometimes too. Someone who's, the vocal folds rigid and it's not going to come back, or vocal paralysis or something like that. How do you handle it for yourself? How do you get ready for that moment? How do you recover from it?
That's a very tough thing, as Mike said. I mean, being there for the patient. In my practice, I'm very emotionally supportive, spending the time. We said, whether it's putting your arm around somebody now in COVID, maybe, or hugging them. But anyway, just being there, having the conversation in person rather than on the phone. But what I find is I have a lot of people coming in to me who have been told by somebody else, you know what, you're never going to sing again, or you need this done and that. And oftentimes it's not the correct information. So they might have gotten devastating information from somebody else, and it really turns out to not be that way. So I think really doing the full evaluation yourself, and then knowing if the right advice has been given to the patient is a very big part of this, because it's happened many, many times, which also goes back to having the doctor who really knows you and that you trust. And there is a lot that can be done in rehabilitation with working with the right. It's really, you have to make sure that we're working with the right people. Are they working with the right voice teacher, and or you know, doing the right rehab, those type of things. So yeah, but unfortunately there are times that you have to somebody the bad news. But like Mike just said, like I can think of one patient I had who had had some surgery. She wanted to be a singer, young, never really quite made it, and she was so encouraged and enthused by what she learned that she's now a speech pathologist working in New York, working with a lot of singers. So taking that expertise and using it as you have, and as my and people that you work with, using it in a different way, but learning from everything that you've done along the way. So important.
Yeah, yeah. You know, and I just have to say on that note about speech pathology, yeah, one of the things that me and my wife Kate have been out in front about in our biography is that Kate had had two open heart surgeries early in her life, and during the first one during our first year of marriage, and the period of time was obviously a tremendous stress on Kate, but also on her family and all of our friends and me personally. And I lost the bottom third of my voice for about 3 months while Kate was during Kate's convalescence, and I didn't know what was going on, and it turned out that it was all muscular tension, just the stress of caring for Kate. It wasn't even reflux, which I knew I had at that point. And you know, the people that engage in that work, engage in your work, Gwen, and also you, Mike. It's you know, to be able to give people hope when they think they might be at the end, but there's still some opportunity. For me, it was a remarkable. I lost the voice, and then I did all these exercises, and I was diligent with the PT, and I got it back. And there really is progress. There's technology and a lot of optimism that I feel like you both must have with advances in your fields. And you know, we're seeing every day some development with regard to COVID vaccines, and how rapidly as a society we've gotten to a place where there's a viable vaccine, where a previous generation it would have taken many more years. What is the shining light of hope? Where have been the most exciting developments in your field, Gwen, with regard to the understanding of vocal science, ENT, as it pertains to singers?
Well, I mean, one thing, there are some people, and there's more interested in the research area of working with different substances that one of the biggest problems we see after surgery is scarring, and we can't always control that. You do, as a surgeon, you do the best you can to do the most perfect surgery, but sometimes something doesn't heal well, or it's just, you know, there's nothing that can be done. And there are some research going on with some new substances that might be able to be injected into the vocal fold or placed in, which could help increase and improve the vibration. So that's one area. And another area is the use of certain lasers. Many years ago, when I was starting out, there was only one, there were lasers, but there was just the carbon dioxide laser, which just basically destroyed tissue. And now there are lasers that can be used to treat certain vascularities, blood vessels, which can really help and are aimed, and they're getting better and better now. So those are a couple of things that have really made a difference in the professional voice community.
Yeah, I've heard about both of those advances, so more with lasers and this idea of an injection that can help the vibration of the fold. That's so cool. I heard something about that, but it's great to hear you expand on that.
Unfortunately, I don't think it's not quite, it's there where it could fill in defects and that type thing. I think there's still research that has to be done to get somebody from a good place to a great place. But you know, sometimes just time heals things, and helping people, sort of guiding them through the whole process, is one of the big things that we end up doing in this field.
I bet. I bet. What about you, Mike? Where are the big advances in orthopedic medicine? The most exciting things? I mean, gosh, I shouldn't know what an MCL or an ACL or a rotator cuff is or any of those things, but we hear about it. Where's the most progress being made in your area?
It's a great question. That's what makes medicine exciting, because it's always evolving. And that's what makes my job so fun, because I'm learning all the time, right? And hopefully I'm you know, not just going with the wave, but actually taking a really smart, educated view to what is really helpful and what is just claiming to be helpful. So the biggest thing in orthopedics, at least in my field, sports medicine, the minimally invasive surgery, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the days where, you would make a 6-inch cut to fix someone's anterior cruciate ligament is now done through 3 small 1/2-inch incisions and maybe another 1-inch incision.
Mm-hmm.
And so you don't have, the effects that Gwen was alluding to, that can happen to any good surgeon, is scar development. And the less dissection you have to do, the less chance that will end up with, for instance, a cranky, stiff knee with a great ACL. And you certainly don't want to see that. But the other thing is, and I think she was alluding to as well, is what we call the biologics. And so, the things that are sort of out there now, the platelet-rich plasma injections, the amniotic stem cell injections, so those things are promising. And, everybody wants this fountain of youth and healing. And yet the studies aren't quite there to tell us how we're going to do this. Are we really able to grow this new tissue? That's what our hope is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so all that is fun, and there's huge amounts of research being done. And we're just gleaning, I think, the early phases of some of those biologics, and hopefully that will continue to, and I think it will. And it's just a matter of getting some better and good studies. And it's hard to tell folks, this may not work just because your friend said he had a stem cell injection, that I'm going to cure you with this. People come in and have, they have so much access to some science, not to necessarily good science, but than they did in years past. And so they come in with certain ideas, and part of that is our job to educate. But it certainly is fun. It's a growing, moving field, and feel fortunate to be involved in it.
Yeah, and that must just keep both of you sort of always having to learn, always stay on the front edge so that you can serve your patients in the fullest way possible. But that's a hopeful note in both of your areas for us to tie off on. Thank you for everything that you do for your patients, because if it weren't for that work and your support of getting them back on the stage or on the field, we wouldn't get to enjoy the performances that they give to us day in, day out. So you're heroes behind the scenes, and we're grateful for that. And I am grateful to both of you for joining us for this episode of UnMic'd. Dr. Gwen Korovin, Dr. Mike Lee, thank you for being with us today. It just was a fantastic conversation, and can't wait to see you both at the opera at some point.
Look forward to it. Thank you.
Great.
Same. Look forward to it. Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us for this episode of UnMic'd, where we blur the edges that connect the world of opera to just about everything else. A new episode will be released each month, so be sure to check our website, azopera.org, join our email list, and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. UnMic'd is a part of Arizona Opera's Connection Lab program, a new series of digital and public offerings designed to facilitate a connection between Arizona communities familiar with our company, as well as opera goers and others well beyond our state. Arizona Opera is grateful to our lead digital sponsors for the 2020-21 season, Ron and Kay McDougall. Arizona Opera's next-gen programs are made possible through the support of Karen Fruin, Roma Witkoff, Jeanette J. Siegel, the Valentine Family Foundation, APS, and Jody Pelusi. To learn more about the programs that are part of Arizona Opera Next Gen, please visit us online at azopera.org.
DJ.